Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ainsley Sparks, the Marketing Manager at BookNet Canada. Now let me introduce Chris Saynor. Chris is responsible for EDItEUR's book publishing standards, including Onyx, FEMA, and EDItEUR. He joined the organization in late 2016. For the previous 8 years, he worked for Giant Chair Incorporated in Paris as a metadata specialist and project manager, and has been responsible for the implementation of Onyx Suite application in many publishing organizations. He's widely known for his work with French industry liaison body CLIL and with BISG committees. Prior to that, he has a 20-year background in bookselling with Waterstones and W.H. Smith. Now, without further ado, I will pass things off to Chris to tell you everything you need to know about audiobook metadata in Onyx.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Ainsley, and thank you for BookNet for putting this on and for hosting this webinar. I hope you can all hear me okay, and you can see my screen. So, welcome to this presentation about audiobook metadata, specifically in Onyx 3. So all the examples of Onyx I'm going to be showing you, and I'm going to be showing you some pointy bracket stuff, as we call it, will be Onyx 3. A lot of what I am going to show you can also be done in Onyx 2.1. Some cannot, though. First slide was going to be a bit about me, but that's all been done, so I'll skip this one. Second slide, I was going to tell you a bit about EDItEUR, for those of you who don't know much about us or don't know anything about us at all. So we're a small, there's two small, as in we have 2 full-timers and 2 part-timers who work for the organization. We're a not-for-profit membership organization. Our role is to develop, support, and promote metadata and identification standards for the global book supply chain. We're based in London, but we have a global membership. We have more than 100 members in over 20 countries, and those members go from very small, tiny companies to huge corporations, and we have membership representing all kinds of different aspects of the global supply chain. In Canada, for example, BookNet themselves are a member, BTLF in Montreal, also a member, Kobo and DeMarc are 2 other Canadian organizations that are active members. Membership is very important to us, not only because it keeps us going, but also because that membership is very good at feeding information to us about the needs of the global book chain. So, audiobooks. So why are we talking about audiobooks? So just a slide to do a bit of a recap about why audiobooks metadata is important. This is an area that's expanded enormously over the last few years. The market has moved rapidly from the cassette and CD to digital. Those digital audio files can be either a download to own model or the subscription streaming services. And we've also seen a huge change in the market demographics. Before, audio was very much skewed towards an older audience, often a more female audience. That has changed a lot. And the other thing that's changed a lot is with the advances in accessibility with e-readers, it's no longer the only option available to visually impaired readers. There's also been a vast change in the most active genres in audiobooks as well. This is the kind of information that organizations like the BookNet do very good reports upon, so I don't need to expand on this. From an Onyx point of view, Onyx has always been able to describe audio products because audio has always been part of our supply chain. And a classic Onyx message can carry information about all your catalog, both audio in physical and digital format, as well as your books and any other products. So why am I talking about audiobook metadata? What is metadata for in our industry? it's for internal use of the publishers. For those of you on the attending who are publishers, you'll be collecting metadata internally. Part of that metadata will remain internal use only, and part of that metadata will become part of what you'll be sharing with the wider metadata supply chain. That metadata is important for distributors and wholesalers who also need good metadata. That metadata is important for retailers. That metadata is important for libraries. It's important for buyers, borrowers, and listeners. Metadata is important for good supply chain efficiency. And metadata is important for market analysis. It's the metadata that allows organizations like BookNet to produce good statistical data. When you are thinking about audiobook metadata, whether you produce it or you receive it, it's important to remember that we're talking about metadata for the whole book supply chain. So sometimes when you see a metadata field, or some of the fields I'm going to be talking about, I say, that's not important to me, but it's going to be important to somebody. That's why it's part of a standard like Onyx. It's because it's important to somebody in the supply chain. So metadata, audiobook metadata, is basically about giving retailers, librarians, educators, listeners enough information so they can make informed choices. And making sure that information is available and used throughout the data supply chain. So we've got to make sure that the metadata is timely, is comprehensive, and is accurate. And this applies to all products in our supply chain. So, excuse me. Audio metadata. So, most important thing to know about audiobooks is they shouldn't be treated as a special project, a special case. From a metadata point of view, they're the same as the other products in the supply chain. You're going to try and send the maximum amount of information, and you're going to be using mostly the same fields as you would be using for other products. You'll be sending title information, information about the contributors, you'll be sending an ISBN, descriptive text, business information, sales rights information, etc. So when we look at the Onyx elements, so this slide and the next slide are an overview of the major data composites in an Onyx message. For those of you who are more familiar with Onyx 3, you'll know that Onyx 3 is made up of blocks of different types of data. There are 7 blocks plus a block 0. So this is the first part of it. So with an audiobook, you will be always sending things like it needs an identifier. Most often that will be the ISBN. When it comes to the descriptive details, you're going to have to send some of these you will need to send, and some of those you could send. Obviously, some things are more relevant if it's a physical audio product, and some are more relevant if it's a digital file. But things like subject and audience, they're vital for any product. They're as vital for digital audio as they are for a physical book. Collection information, if your audio is part of a series, it's important to send that information correctly. Second part of the Onyx messages, these are the other blocks. Block 2, what we call collateral details. So this is everything that, a lot of this is the marketing texts, or things like the cover image, supporting resources, reviews, etc. Those are things that are going to also be very important for audiobooks as they are for physical books. The newest part of Onyx 3 is block 7, promotion detail. This is a new part of Onyx that allows you to send data about events, readings, signings, book promotion tours, etc. Could also be interesting for audiobooks. Block 3, content detail. This is an incredibly useful bit of Onyx 3 when it comes to audiobooks. It's content detail that allows you to send very detailed structured data about chapter level metadata. I'm going to be looking at that in a bit more detail in a bit. Block 4, everything you need to know about who published this, under what imprint, what is the publication date, what are the associated sales rights, etc. Block 5 is about relationships, another very important bit of data for Onyx. And then block 6 is everything to do with your business models. It's where can I sell this product? What is the market? Who supplies it? And what are the pricing? Is this what is the price in Canadian dollars? What is the price in US dollars? Is this do I have an export price for the European Union? Is this a subscription only? Is this a free product? When is this price valid from and to? All that kind of information is in block 6. So now I'm going to look at some of these things in more detail. So what we start with is we have a book, usually, with the content. And you may choose to commission, as a publisher, the audio version, somebody reading that book. That also might inspire some sort of adaptation. Maybe there'll be a dramatized version of it. And in this case, this was made for BBC Radio, so it's a radio play. They also turned this book into a TV series. They brought out some tie-in material to go with the TV series, as well as the TV series itself. All these different formats and ways of presenting the content need to be related to each other. So in Onyx, you can send, using from list 51, a thing called product relation. So that allows you to say the audiobook is an alternative format to the book. You can also say things like, and here is a bit of Onyx for you. So we have a code here, product relation code 43. That code is telling me that this product has been adapted from this ISBN. So this bit of data would be sent to accompany the dramatization, and it's saying that this is based on this ISBN, this book. But in Onyx, you can send all sorts of different relationships. Those relationships are really important. All they do in an Onyx record is point towards another ISBN. But that ISBN allows somebody who receives that data to create links. So if I enjoyed the book, or if I enjoyed the TV series, which I did, you can point me towards the audio. So I can find the audiobook and I can listen to the whole novel and that kind of thing. Another very important element in Onyx and for audiobooks is to describe the format. So what you're looking at here, for those who are not familiar with it, is an extract of an Onyx code list. This is taken from the online browser version of the code lists. And what's important in this code list is what's in the second column, the 2 letters. These are the codes. These are the codes that are sent in Onyx. What you see in the third column is an English language version of explaining what that code means. What you see in the third column is available in many languages. These are translated. What remains constant is the code. So that code, wherever you send it to, they will know that code means X. Now for audio, there are a lot of codes here that describe physical formats, but the ones that are probably the most common used now are AJ, which is to indicate that this audio file is a downloadable one, equivalent to the download to own model. You have AO, which is for online audio only, so an audio file that would be only available via a streaming model. And then you have AN, which indicates that the audio file is available both as downloadable and an online. depending on the business model that you have with that particular partner. Now that product form can be enhanced with another set of codes that are sent in Onyx from list 175. This is what we call product form detail. And this list allows you to give extra detail about the format. So we have on the left-hand side the codes A101 to A112. It's a whole series of codes that allow you to say this is a downloadable audio file and this is the file format. On the right-hand side, another extract from this list, you can give extra information about the audio file. You might want to say, if it's a children's product, it's a read-along audio. This implies there's a book that goes with it. You may want to say, as we have the code A310 or 311, there is background music or sound effects. Very important little bit of information to add to that. Something else, another very important bit of metadata is all the information that you can send about contributors. There is a lot of information you can send about contributor, but this particular thing that we're looking at is the role that the contributor takes. So this is another Onyx code list. It's list 17. And a lot of the roles that specifically do with audio materials start with E. And the most important one for audio is E07. As I said just now, it's this code that is sent in Onyx, okay? Not the words in the column 3. So E07 means this contributor is the reader, is the person who is reading this book out loud. It's important to understand and to read what each code means. It does not matter what a data receiver decides to display on their website. So E07 could be displayed as read by or reader, could be displayed as performed by or performer, could be displayed as narrated by narrator. That is independent of what this code actually means. This code E07 means all of those things. So it's very important to send the right code, because Onyx also has a code called narrator. And it's very common now to use, lots of websites use the word narrator for the actor that reads the book out loud. In Onyx, narrator has a very specific meaning. It's the character in a dramatized production that keeps the story moving along. We also have actor, and again, very specific role. It's an actor in a dramatized version. So even if there's an actor reading out the audio book, you wouldn't use E01 for the person reading it out loud. You'd always use the E07, and the person receiving the data can choose how they display that. So here's a little sample of Onyx. So what we've got here is a little part of what you can send in information about a contributor. A lot of you will use systems that will create the Onyx for you, and you won't necessarily ever see the actual Onyx, the actual Onyx message, but this is what it would look like. You may be only entering the name of the author or the reader. You may choose the roles, and that will create the code. So here we have the role A01, author. It's very important, some information about the original author. There's an identifier here. Identifiers are very useful bits of metadata. This particular identifier is an ISNI, an International Standard Name Identifier, a very useful bit of metadata for creating linked data. And here you can also see Georgina Sutton is the actor that is reading out the book, so we are sending E07. Another very important bit of metadata for audio is the edition type. Edition type, which is from list 21 in Onyx, allows you to give a bit more information. The most important two for audiobooks is it an abridged version or unabridged? Unabridged code is UBR, which you can see on the screen. The abridged code is ABR. So here we have another version of Vanity Fair, and this is the dramatized version, another BBC recording. As you can see, we are sending the information E01. These are the actors. Emma Fielding, who plays Becky Sharp in the production. We also have Stephen Fry, who is the narrator, because he narrates the play, he moves the play forward. So here we're using narrator in the sense of the code in Onyx. I added another contributor role here, V22, which is dramatized by. When you have a large, if you've created an audio version that has multiple contributors, you can send like this. You can also send a full cast list and credit list in the same way as you can send a table of contents. So you can send that inside your Onyx message as well, which gives structured information about the contributors, makes that searchable, and always boosts the discoverability of the title. And again, we're using a value from list 21, edition type, and this is dramatized. Dramatized is what you normally use if you've got a version like this. Finally, the major contributor type that we use with audio products, E09. E09 just means speaker. So in this example, it's a lecture. It's a series of lectures on British literature. If you were sending information about a podcast style of where you have several presenters or a presenter talking about things, E09 would be the most relevant one. Again, I'm sending an identifier in this one, an ISNI. This one is very useful because Professor John Sutherland has his own unique identifier, but there's another John Sutherland who is a musician from a boys band called B3, who also has an identifier, but obviously a different one. It's one of the uses of the ISNI. Another element in Onyx is a series of codes called content type. This is taken from code list 81. And this allows you to say that the content of this product is primarily text, primarily audio, primarily video. You can also then say that it also has, so if you have a mixed product, you can say primary content is audio, secondary content is text. So when it comes to audio books, there are three that will probably be the most commonly used. 01, which says this is an audio book. Primary content of this is audio book. 02, that allows you to say that it's a performance version of spoken word, so dramatized version. And then 13, which is other speech content, which you would use for things like lectures, podcasts, etc. And here we have an extract from that list showing you some of the options that you have. Extent. So extent in Onyx is, so for physical books, extent would be what you would use for sending page counts. And for audio, the common use for that is to send duration. Now you can send total duration. So for example, the top example is the audiobook version of Vanity Fair, and it's 32 hours and 18 minutes long. The second one, just sending a normal duration, 4 hours and 33 minutes is the length of the dramatized version. The third one, as with page numbering, you can also send more detailed duration. This is the duration of the introductory material. This is the duration of the main content. The main content here is 24 hours long. You can also send duration of end content, and you can send production duration, which allows you to say, this is the duration of everything, including music, credits, etc. And when it comes to timing, there may be another timing that you want to send out in your data, and that is before purchasing or borrowing this audio, you can listen to it. So this is a way in Onyx 3, and this is one of the things you cannot do in Onyx 2.1, is you can say, I'd like to allow somebody to preview it, but I want to set a limit to that. So you can make, you have three options here. You can say it's not permitted, it's permitted subject to limits, or there's no limits on it. So this is, we set a limit, and our limit is a time limit. So we're saying here, you can listen to 12 minutes of this audio prior to purchase. Now, if you just send this, most data receivers will just let a potential listener, buyer, listen to the first 12 minutes. But maybe you want to be more detailed, because maybe the first 12 minutes is introductory material, and you want the person to actually listen to the actor reading the actual content of the book. The voice of the person reading is something that's key in choice of when we decide to purchase an ebook or not. So an audiobook or not. So you can then say, give a qualifier to this and say, yes, you can listen to 12 minutes, and you can listen to that 12 minutes starting at 16 minutes and 50 seconds from the start of the audio file and going to 28 minutes and 50 seconds. Okay. This is a way of saying, yes, give a free preview, but specifically of this morsel of the audiobook. Right, chapter level metadata, something that's very useful and very important in audiobooks. So this corresponds in Onyx 3 to block 3. You can also send limited chapter level metadata in Onyx 2.1. It's in the content item part of Onyx 2.1. But this that I'm going to show you is Onyx 3. So let's go back to our series of lectures, Classics of British Literature. So as we saw in the extent, this is 24 hours long. So if as a user all I saw was track 1, track 2, track 33, it's not going to be very easy to navigate. So for part of the user experience, it's really important to give them things that we can understand. So you want to see something like this, where you have a list of chapter titles. So I can find my way around the chapter numbers, the title of the chapter, and maybe also a description of what's in that chapter. So this is the user-friendly side of things. So it's important to give people who are creating websites, who are selling or making audio available, information they can use for the end user. And this is what it looks like in Onyx. So this is just a small extract of what you can do with chapter level metadata. This block 3 is very comprehensive. You can actually send a lot of information in this part of Onyx. You can send things like identifiers. So you can give each chapter a unique identifier. If there's a different contributor to each chapter, for some reason, you can also send contributor data at this level. You can send different subject codes and different keywords for a chapter as well. You can send individual marketing collaterals as well in this level. In this extract, so we can see what we're saying is this is when the chapter starts and ends, and this is the length of the chapter. So this is for consumers. This is where the chapter starts and ends in relation to the beginning of the audiobook. We can also send things like the type of component and the number. In this case, this is a series of lectures. We could call that chapters. It could be called something else as well if you need to. And we can send the name of the chapter. For those of you who are familiar with Onyx 3, you'll see that the chapter is sent in the same structure, same title structure as we use for sending the title of a work, or that's used inside the collection. What changes here is what we call title element level. and that's set at 04, and that indicates to anybody who receives it that this title is the title of a content item. It's not the title of a product, and it's not the title of a collection. And as you also can see, we've sent an HTML text with some basic markup of the description of this chapter. Language. Language is another very important aspect of audiobook metadata. So here we have an example. This is a purely audio course, so there's no book to go with this. And we have various information sent about the languages. So if you see the top language information, we're saying that the audio track, the main audio track, is in English, but American English. We're also saying that the Spanish on it is done by Spanish, Colombian and Mexican Spanish accents. The final part of this audience, we're indicating for clarity that the intended audience language of the intended language audience is an English-speaking audience. So this is only aimed at English-speaking audience. If this was Vanity Fair, we could send language role 01 and just ENG, say it was English. We could then send a repeat to say language 08, English, US if it was read by an American actor, or GB if it was read by a British actor, CA it's read by a Canadian actor, AU it's read by an Australian actor. That accent information, say where the language of the person who's doing the audio tracks, is also important. I'll give you an example in Spanish. So this book, which has been very successful, it's translated into many languages, exists in Spanish. So for the text, it's just in Spanish. But when you come to reading it, it's important to know whether it's being read by a European Castilian Spanish speaker, or whether it's being read by somebody from a Latin American country. And if it's being read by Latin American, is it being read with a particular accent, or is it being read using what we call neutral Latin American Spanish, which was which is a special, we have a special code for that in Onyx. This is to say neutral Latin American Spanish is a special variation of Latin American of Spanish, developed for the film and the TV industry and now used a lot for audio versions. So we often find that for Spanish language, there are two versions, one with Castilian and one with neutral Latin American Spanish. But this is also very important for things read in English or in French. We want to know, is this being read by a British speaker? Is this being read by a North American, by a Canadian, by a US speaker? That can affect the choices that some people make. Supporting material. This is the kind of thing that you'd be sending in block 2. So things like the cover images, etc. But some audio material comes with supplementary material. So for example, the Spanish methods that we look at that are used as an example for language may come with a vocabulary list. And so here, what we're doing is we're giving you a bit of Onyx that says the resource content is a student's guide. It's meant for the end customers and students. It's being sent as a text. Here's the caption I'd like you to put with it when you display it. And it's a resource in PDF format, and here's the link. So you can send this kind of information as well in block 2. Podcasts, metadata. So most podcasts are free, but I know sometimes there are some need to send podcast metadata. For the majority of information about a podcast, it's the same as everything else in audiobooks. We do have in Onyx a special code from a list 12, and these are called trade categories. And there's a code 17 that allows you to flag something as a podcast. This list is a list of various things that need to be tagged, usually for market reasons or legal reasons. They may be things like school books in some markets that are subject to whole different rules and things like that, open market editions. And so podcast is here. It's just there as a flag to let the data receiver know this one we categorize as podcasts. Podcasts are also usually parts of series, and so as with any audiobook, if they're part of a series of books, you can send that in Onyx 3 using the collection information. So this one is an ongoing podcast from the BBC World Service. And this particular episode was called The Man Who First Published Harry Potter. This is sent in the same way as you'd send collection information about a book, about an audiobook, and about any other product. Same with an podcast or audiobook that was part of a limited series. So this one is another one that I got from the BBC. The series was called The Missing Crypto Queen. There were 8 episodes, and the final episode was called The Technology and the Dream. So what's next with Onyx for audiobooks? As I said earlier, our members are very important. They send us information or ask us questions or make requests, but they're not the only ones. People who use Onyx and who think there are things are missing from that ask us, can we add this? Is there a way of expressing this in Onyx? And if we think it's something that should be in Onyx, we will send that out to our national groups. And then we have a system of governance, and anything that we gets added to Onyx is added only with the consent of the national groups through our international steering committee. Myself and Graham in London do not sit here going, oh, wouldn't it be good if we added so-and-so to your Onyx? We don't do that. And so one of the things that we were requested to do, and we are working on, is Block 8. Block 8 is production level metadata. And this is for print on demand. It's for ebook files and for digital audio files. And this is currently being worked on in a working group, and we're looking at how can we add metadata that a publisher may want to send to the people that are producing the audio file. So this might be file names, the duration of the files, codec, bitrate information, time points, that kind of information. So that's what's being worked on at the moment. If you're signed up for the EDItEUR newsletter or for the Onyx mailing list, whenever Block 8 is ready, we'll be announcing it on that. Okay, and that's me. So this link that you should see on your screens, if you copy it down, that's where you'll find copies of my slides. But don't worry, if you don't copy it down, BookNet Canada will also be sending that out to you, so you'll have a copy of it. So now I'd like to throw it open to questions.
Hi, Chris. Thank you. I've put a link to the slides in the chat. I'll do it again at the end so that you don't have to scroll back too far, because we did get several questions in the chat. The first one is, what is the relation of Onyx for audiobooks and the audiobooks recommendation by the W3C?
The new W3C project. So W3C are working on a new file manifest. So it's something that you can to goes with the actual audio file. So it's a way of giving information about what that file contains. The Onyx, same with your EPUBs, your digital books. Onyx doesn't actually go with the actual file. So audio data that you put in the Onyx would be complementary to a lot of the data that will be included in the audio file. As with, for example, as with accessible information, you put a lot of accessibility information into your EPUB files, but you also be sending that in your Onyx files because you need to tell people. Not everybody has the file in front of them. So the project that W3C is working on is a standardized way of wrapping your actual audio files. These are things to give people information about those audio files, even if they don't yet have them. I hope that answers the question.
Me too. Next question. If you have a sample file created of roughly 5 minutes, is there a way to list that it is available for preview in the Onyx?
So you mean, so if I've understood correctly, this is the actual audio file this is just an audio extract of an audiobook, and you can send previews of that kind of information. Yes, so for example, you could send it with another audiobook saying, we've got this other book coming out. There's ways of sending marketing information about that. If that person wants to send me an email, I can point to the right bit of Onyx to show them.
Great, and your email's up there on that slide, so they can find you that way. Okay.
And anybody can send myself or Graham at EDItEUR questions about Onyx anytime, and we'll try and answer them. Bearing in mind there's only 2 of us.
Well, we have a lot of questions coming in. So the next one is someone was interested in whether they can relate chapters to tracks and files. And then someone else added onto that, especially when there's a correspondence between files and chapters.
Okay. Yes, this is an interesting question, and this is what Block 8 is looking at, and also part of the work that W3C is doing with its new manifest. So the chapter level metadata I showed you is consumer facing, but you can put IDs and you can put links in there, so you can create a relationship between the chapter level metadata and files. What Block 8 will allow you to do is also give far more detailed information about the actual files, because a file may not correspond to an actual chapter. I know this is a complex part of the audio supply chain. So there should be an example, and if there isn't, we need to create one of a chapter, full chapter level metadata, which should include the information about IDs and links to that. Again, please feel free to write to me or to Graham, and I could try and send you a sample bit of Onyx with that in.
Great. Next question. What makes an audiobook and its metadata accessible beyond the inherent accessibility of audiobooks?
That's a good question. So we have within Onyx, what makes an audiobook accessible? There's the DAISY formats. When before there was the big digital audio revolution, a lot of the work was done about synchronizing audio and text. It's what you can do with an EPUB. An EPUB, you can have an audio and a text file together, and that's part of what makes an audio accessible. Of course, that enters into other issues about having the text available with the audio. From a metadata point of view, we have codes to indicate the different accessibility features. I know that DAISY and Inclusive Publishing are running a series of webinars on accessibility. I'm trying to think what else would make an audio file accessible, more accessible than it is by its very nature. I think it's also about accessibility in the larger sense, as in good metadata. So could I, if I'm visually impaired and I'm using a device, can I find it by using voice search? Is the metadata behind it going to be good enough to allow me to do a voice search? am I going to be able to tell, can I listen to the voice? Is it a synchronized voice? Some people who are visually impaired actually prefer to hear a synchronized voice rather than an actor's voice, because that's how they become accustomed to listening to things. I think part of the accessibility information is giving the right metadata. Can I get this? Is it available to me? As it happens with books as well. It's not actually accessible to me because I don't have access to the right. I'm not in the right place, or I don't have access to the right tools. Yes, that's a very interesting discussion. Sounds like something for a whole webinar. Accessibility.
That'll be the next one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Next question. One of our viewers said, glad to see there's an option to send information on auxiliary content, but is there an option to send actual information on the files that make up an audiobook, like a list of MP3s, file sizes, and the relation to chapters, etc.?
Yes, that's block 8. That's what we're working on.
Great.
So if you think about the Onyx blocks, think about blocks 1 to 6. You're basically describing the end product, and what we need is also to be able to describe some of the files that will make up that product. So if you can describe already in Onyx that it's a WAV file and various technical information, but the new bit of Onyx, block 8, which should be available, we're hoping, by the end of 2020, the end of this year, will allow you to describe the files that make up the product. And there's a whole series of slides that follow this one with various information, and on that is included, hang on, sorry, lost it. I was going to say there's a mailing list, and I encourage you to join the mailing list, and because we'll be announcing that then. Sorry. Okay, next question.
I know there's a lot of excitement in the BookNet office about block 8.
Yep.
Next question. Should we add pricing for each currency in our intended market, US dollars, Canadian dollars, Great Britain pound, etc.? Would retailers use that data?
Well, some retailers would definitely use that data. It depends how much control you want to have on your pricing. So if you're a Canadian publisher publishing stuff in English, then your major markets are going to be Anglophone markets. I think the more pricing information you give, the better it is. If you do, for example, if you find that you sell your audiobooks particularly well in Norway, choose a price for Norway, choose a price for South Africa. But if you know that you sell the odd one, in Namibia, sometimes in Singapore, but you don't have enough information, make sure you've chosen a base currency price, and you've said, this is my price for all these territories that I don't have information for. So I do think it's important to give information about pricing for your principal markets, and make that clear. And also, when you make that clear in Onyx, make sure that you associate a territory with that price, so it's clear to anybody who receives it, this is my price for this market. Obviously, that's a business decision and depends on the systems you have. I mean, for North America, you've definitely got to send Canadian dollars and a US dollar price and make it clear, this is my price for Canada in Canadian dollars, and this is my price in US dollars for the US, and then choose which currency you do for the rest of the world.
Great.
Okay.
This one is a question about the upcoming Block 8. In practice, a lot of resellers here, at least in Nordics, request the file to be sent in different formats. Some want WAVs, some want MP3s at certain bit rates. So there's no point in sending a general version. Is it possible to create separate versions per receiver?
Yes. It depends on how your systems are set up, but yes, you can. Block 8, because one of the things about Onyx 3 is you can send blocks of information. So if you think about block 0, if you think about that first set of slides, block 0 is a constant. You must send that with all your Onyx files because that's got the identifier of both the product and the record. But you're not obliged to send every single block. So you will be able to send block 8 on its own, or you could send block 8 with the rest of the metadata. So you can change, yes, you can definitely send different information to different receivers. So everything that's constant, send that once. But block 8, you can send different block 8s to different people.
Great. And this is the last question from our chat. Would there be a way to link the W3C recommendation in the Onyx as, say, a supporting resource?
Yes. They use, because you can point to the Onyx file. I would think so. Yes. I'm just trying to think of the links, because you can send links to different supporting resources, and I think you can. If you can't, then we can make I mean, if you can't already do it, it would be a question of adding a new code for us to say, this is specifically this resource that we're pointing you to. Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head if you did. I don't think we haven't, because it's a standard that's still in beta, it's still being tested. We don't have a specific code to say this is what this is, but you can send links to that kind of thing. And if we need to, if the market wants it, we will add a code to say this is what this link is. So it wouldn't be very difficult to update a code list to allow you to send that.
Great. That's the end of the questions from the chat. Thank you for answering them all.
It's okay. You're very welcome. And please, and everybody on this chat, if you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to us or use the Onyx mailing list. It's a great way of asking questions and getting the whole Onyx community to answer them. That's also to stop us getting, because it's only Graham and myself, be patient if we don't answer straight away. But we're happy to take questions by send us email questions. Also, as Block 8 is still in working group, so we have a group of a diverse group from different organizations who are specialized, helping us decide to look at the needs. Questions about what possibly could be going on in that block 8 or what could be needed do help us as well, because we can say, oh, right, that's something we haven't taken into consideration for block 8. So also feel free to contact us with questions about what that block 8 could contain, because that could be very useful for us if it's things that we haven't thought about.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for that presentation. That was excellent. And thank you, everyone who joined us today.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope it was useful. And thank you to BookNet again for organizing this.